The Fly on a Ceiling, a Math Myth by Dr. Julie Glass, illustrated by Richard Walsh. This is the story of a guy who lived a long time ago. He lived in France. He was a French guy, so he had a French name. His name was Rene Descartes. This may sound like a funny name to you, but in France it is perfectly normal. Rene was a philosopher. A philosopher is someone who thinks about why things are the way they are. Rene was a great philosopher. Many of his ideas are still famous today. But even though Rene was a great philosopher, he did have one problem. He was messy. This problem started out small, but it got bigger and bigger. The funny thing was, Rene did not know he had a problem until he started to lose things. His notebook, his favorite hat, his book about stars, his inkwell. Then he found the inkwell. Now Rene knew he had a problem. This must stop, Rene said to himself. He decided to take a walk and try to think of a solution to his problem. It took him a moment to find his coat, his hat, and the front door. Rene went to his favorite bakery to buy a fresh loaf of bread. Then he headed to his favorite place to think, the bank of the river of Seine. Rene ate some of the bread while he walked. He looked at the water and wondered how he could keep better track of his things. Night fell and Rene was still thinking. He was thinking so hard that he didn't look where he was going. Splash! Into the Seine went Rene Descartes. When he was fished out of the water, he was cold and wet, and his bread was soggy. Rene walked home. By the time he got there, he was sneezing and wheezing. He crawled into the bed and fell asleep. The next morning, Rene still felt dreadful. Not only that, but he couldn't find a handkerchief, or an extra blanket, or the log to make a fire. He couldn't even find his soggy bread, which should have dried out by then. Rene crawled sadly back into the bed. He stared at his ceiling. The ceiling was the only place in his room that wasn't messy. Rene wished that he will live on a neat ceiling instead of on the messy floor. Just then, he noticed a fly on the ceiling. The fly flew off and landed near one corner. Then it flew off and landed in another corner. Then it landed above Rene's toes. Then it stopped right over Rene's head. Rene started to think. He wondered if the fly ever landed in the same place twice. This might seem like a weird thing to think about, but Rene was a philosopher, so it was normal for him. I need to record where the fly landed so I can know how many times it landed in the same place, he thought. But how can I do that? Rene thought and thought. Suddenly, he had a brilliant idea. It was so brilliant that he jumped out of the bed and did a jig. He knew how to record exactly where the fly landed on the ceiling. Rene took a piece of charcoal from the fire. Then he climbed up on the chair and started drawing lines on the ceiling. First, Rene drew lines from the north wall to the south wall. Next, he drew lines from one side to the other. Then he numbered the line along two of the walls after he got back into the bed. Rene watched the fly on the ceiling. When it landed, he counted the lines over to the spot. He wrote down the number of the line 2. Then he counted the lines up to the spot. He wrote down the number 5. Together, the two number 2 and 5 told him exactly where the fly was. The number 2 and 5 are called coordinates. The first coordinate is 2, measures how far away the fly is from the left side. The second coordinate 5 measures how far away the fly is from the bottom wall. Rene spent the whole morning watching the fly and sneezing. If you had gone to visit him, he might have said, "The fly is 6 over the 3 up," or "The fly is 4 over 7 up," or "The fly is 8 over 1 up." Every spot on the ceiling had its own set of coordinates. Recording the coordinate of the fly over and over again gave Rene another brilliant idea. Maybe he could keep track on his stuff in the same way he kept track on the fly. It would be even easier because a hat can get up and fly away. Rene jumped out of bed again. He pushed everything into the kitchen. Now the floor of his room was as clean as his ceiling. But he couldn't draw the grid on the floor with the charcoal. It would rub off too soon. Rene went next door to see his neighbor had any paint. What luck! His neighbor was a painter. Rene and the painter painted a grid on the Rene's floor. Then they went to the bakery to buy a bread. By the time they got back, the paint had dried. The painter helped Rene put his things in the place on the grid. They found Rene's hat, his star book, his quill pen, his old boots, his journal from when he was 10, and many other things that Rene didn't even know were missing. On a chart, Rene carefully recorded where everything went. After that, Rene's home was never messy again. Well, hardly.